She was just a little black girl, alone, frightened, and holding her mother's badge like it was proof she mattered. But the officer didn't see that. He saw only her skin. He chuckled, shaking his head, mocking every word she said. "Your mom's the chief? That's cute." His laughter drew a crowd, his tone dripping with arrogance. But within moments, the sound of heavy boots echoed across the gas station floor. A shadow fell over him, a uniform, a badge, and a face he never expected. Because standing behind him was the very woman he mocked, the chief of police. And her eyes said everything. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon. The sun hung low over the small suburban town, painting long shadows across the cracked pavement of a gas station on the corner of Maple and 6th. Inside the convenience store, a young black girl named Ava clutched a few dollars and a small stuffed bear, her mom's gift before another long shift. Her mother, Chief Renee Carter, was the town's first black female police chief. She had earned respect from some, resentment from others. While Renee spent her days fighting for justice, her daughter often found herself navigating a world that didn't always see her the same way her mother did. Brave, brilliant, deserving. That afternoon, Ava waited by the car while her mom finished a quick call at the station. She hummed softly, counting cars passing by. But when two police cruisers pulled up, her calm vanished. The officers inside, both white, both wearing easy smirks, looked her up and down like she didn't belong there. One of them stepped out, towering over her. "Hey, kid," he said, voice dripping with mock concern. "You lost or something?" She shook her head, explaining that her mom was coming soon, that she was the chief. But instead of listening, he burst into laughter. The other joined in, pulling out his phone to record, amused by what he thought was a child's wild imagination. Ava's eyes welled up. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, but she knew what it meant. Her mother had told her, "There are some people who will never believe you, no matter what you say." So she stood there, clutching the badge her mother had let her hold for courage. Cars drove by. People stared. No one stepped in. Minutes passed. The laughter grew louder. But just as the officer's mockery peaked, the rumble of a familiar black SUV filled the air. Tires screeched to a halt. The door opened, and out stepped the woman they'd been mocking without even realizing it. The chief had arrived, and she wasn't smiling. The officers didn't notice her at first. Chief Renee Carter stood at the edge of the parking lot, her sharp eyes taking in every detail: the officer's laughter, the fear on her daughter's face, the faint sound of a recording phone. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't move just yet. Years of experience had taught her the power of silence. The moment before a storm breaks, Ava saw her first. Relief flooded her small face, but she didn't call out. She didn't have to. The chief's presence alone said everything. "Everything okay here?" Renee's voice cut through the air, calm but cold, like ice cracking underfoot. The laughter stopped instantly. The taller officer turned around, annoyance on his face, until he saw the uniform, the badges, the authority standing before him. "Oh, Chief Carter," he stammered, trying to recover. "Didn't see you there. We were just, checking on the kid." Renee's gaze didn't waver. "My kid." The words were sharp, deliberate, heavy. She stepped closer, her boots echoing on the concrete. "And it seems you've been checking a little too hard." The second officer lowered his phone, his face draining of color. The small crowd that had gathered went silent. You could hear the hum of the gas pumps, the faint breeze, even Ava's shaky breathing. Renee crouched beside her daughter, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You okay, baby?" Ava nodded, clutching the badge in her tiny hands. The chief stood again, her eyes burning with a mixture of fury and restraint. "How long were you here?" she asked, her tone deceptively calm. The taller officer swallowed hard. "Just a few minutes, ma'am." "We didn't realize." "Didn't realize what?" she interrupted. "That a black child standing alone must be lost? Or lying, or less believable than you?" No one dared answer. One of the bystanders, a woman recording on her phone, whispered, "Keep filming." And she did. Renee walked a slow circle around the officers, her presence commanding, controlled. You wear that badge, she said quietly. And you think it gives you the right to humiliate a child? To make her question her worth? The taller officer shook his head quickly. No, Chief, that's not what— Then tell me, she snapped. What was funny? Silence. The weight of her words hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. People around began murmuring, recognizing the face now confronting the officers, the same woman featured on local news. Praised for her leadership and criticized by others who never believed she belonged in that uniform. And now, she stood before them, not as a headline, but as a mother. One of the officers muttered an apology. The other just stared at the ground, shame and disbelief tangled across his face. But it was too late. The moment was already spreading, filmed, shared, and echoing across screens that would soon carry the truth. Renee looked at her daughter again, her voice softening. You did nothing wrong. Don't ever forget that. She turned back to the officers. You two, she said, her voice regaining its steel, will meet me again. But not here. They didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. But they would, because the next time they saw her, it wouldn't be at a gas station. It would be in a courtroom. 3 days later, the same officers walked into a courtroom, nervous, pale, and sweating beneath their polished badges. What had started as a simple incident report had turned into a formal investigation. Videos of the gas station encounter had gone viral, exposing their laughter, their mockery, and their disbelief in a black child's truth. They had been summoned to a disciplinary hearing, expecting to face a faceless panel. Some internal affairs officer they could charm or talk their way around. But when the doors opened, and they saw who was seated at the head of the table, every ounce of confidence drained from their faces. It was Chief Renee Carter, the same woman they had laughed at through her child, the same woman they dismissed with a smirk. Now she sat in her full uniform, eyes sharp and unreadable, her presence commanding the room like a storm waiting to break. Officers, she began, her voice steady but cold. I trust you remember me. Neither spoke. The taller one shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped in front of him. The other avoided her gaze entirely. She continued. 3 days ago, you approached a child who had committed no crime, posed no threat, and yet you made her a spectacle. You laughed at her. You doubted her. You embarrassed her. She paused, letting the silence bite. That child was my daughter. The words hit like thunder. Even the court stenographer looked up, stunned. Renee leaned forward. You didn't see a child that day. You saw color. You saw what you wanted to see. Her tone sharpened. And that, gentlemen, is exactly why this department fails to change. The officers mumbled apologies, their voices trembling. But apologies couldn't undo what the world had already seen. The video had reached millions. The department faced public outrage. Renee stood, her voice echoing through the chamber. You wear the same uniform I do. But remember, authority without empathy is abuse, and laughter in the face of innocence is disgrace. She gathered her papers, her eyes finally softening. For her daughter, for what this meant. Hearing adjourned, she said quietly. As she walked away, one truth lingered in every heart present. That day, Justice didn't just wear a badge, it looked like her. In the days that followed, the video continued to spread. Millions watched as a little black girl stood in a gas station parking lot, clutching a badge while grown men mocked her. They watched the moment her mother arrived, the shift in power, the fear in the officers' faces, and the unspoken truth beneath it all. Some viewers cried. Others raged, but most simply sat in silence, realizing this story wasn't rare. It was just recorded. Chief Renee Carter didn't speak to the press at first. She didn't need to. The footage spoke louder than any statement could. But when she finally stood before cameras a week later, her message wasn't about revenge, it was about responsibility. There's a lesson here, she said. Not just for my department, but for every person wearing a badge, every parent raising a child, and every bystander who thinks silence is harmless. My daughter didn't need saving that day. She needed believing. Her words struck something deeper than policy or procedure. They struck the human heart. For many, this was another story in the long, painful pattern of America's racial reality. But for Ava, it was something else. At school, some of her classmates whispered, others stared, but she walked taller now. She had seen her mother stand up to something cruel and win.